Hi, I'm Rhiannon, founder of Travltalk, the app that helps you meet travel buddies on the road. Travltalking is our podcast where we hear from real people travelling the world, one country at a time. This week we'll be hearing from Thom, one of our first Travltalk photojournalists, on what it's like being a contributor and the different experiences he's had turning the lens around and sharing his experiences with our audience. We'll also hear from Arianna Lee, who is studying at the University of Sussex but has currently undertaken an exchange program in Adelaide, South Australia. She's going to let us know what the differences are between studying in the UK and Australia, and also some tips for you if you're considering an exchange yourself. Go your own way. So we're joined now by Thom, who's originally from Australia, and actually he is a doctor, but recently he has been over in London and been doing some articles for us on the Travltalk Contributor Network. Thom, let's find out a bit about you. We always start by asking people on the show what's their number. So how many countries have you visited to date?
Oh my goodness, that's a difficult question. Let's think. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Oh goodness, I think I'm up to about 20 something now, which I know isn't too impressive by your standards, Rhiannon, but for us it's pretty good.
Well, I mean, it's never too late to start, right? And you've been pretty busy. I mean, we've got quite a few of your articles up on Travltalk. What was the last trip you took?
We were just in Rome over the Easter weekend just gone. Yeah, we came back last night.
Wonderful. What did you think of Rome?
Rome was lovely. I'm sort of fascinated by the ancient aspects of it, and then how that's translated into sort of the modern Italian culture, and the mishmash of the two together is really interesting. So yeah, we had a really lovely time.
Nice. And what is the next trip that you've got planned?
We are officially relocating back to Australia as of next Sunday. So I guess that's the next bigger trip, and then we'll explore a little bit more of Australia when we get home.
Well, yeah, there's lots of places that you can go from Australia that are not European focused. I suppose, sort of changes to the Asian travel destinations.
Absolutely, yeah. And I mean, we're going to head to Tasmania in June and check out the Dark Mofo Festival and things. So there's plenty of stuff going on, absolutely.
And when did you catch the travel bug?
Great question. I guess coming out of university, was the first time I sort of went overseas with my then girlfriend, who's now my wife. We did a bit of a mishmash trip, I guess, where we went to Japan, and then from Japan flew to Europe and went to Paris, and then stayed in London for a little while. And that was my first time really doing an overseas trip sort of without my family. And that was, I guess, when that sort of caught on. And since then, we sort of went on a big trip every year, and that has accumulated in us being over in the UK at the moment, and then taking a trip sort of every fortnight.
So you went from sort of just getting your feet wet to sort of diving straight in, it sounds.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's how it's worked out. So it's been a fantastic journey.
And the final question, sometimes people find this hard, but what is your most memorable travel story that you recall to date?
The main one was probably, we went to Paris in sort of August this year on the Eurostar, which was sort of, we've been to Paris a few times, but this was the first time we sort of went without the pressure of having to see all the main touristy things. We got to enjoy it a little bit more. And when we got into Paris, it was sort of about midnight. We checked into our hotel and then went for a walk around the opera region where we were. It was about 1 a.m. at that point, and we were hearing this music from the opera house and was wondering what was going on. And as we sort of turned the corner around, we saw all of these people dancing in this sort of 1 a.m. tango club that was happening on the steps of the opera house. And it was just such a beautiful, unexpected moment of culture and life in Paris, and it just has really stuck with me.
Yeah, it's really those random experiences that you don't expect, I think, that become the most memorable stories. I mean, you certainly turn the lens on those as often as you can when you're going to these different cities. So far you've created a piece on Gothenburg, Amsterdam, you've done Brussels. I mean, what were your favourites?
Recently, I think I've really enjoyed being in Italy. So Bologna and Venice and sort of the smaller cities outside of Rome that really have their own culture and identity that's really well defined. And I've really liked going into those experiences and taking my camera with me. And I just sort of shoot everything that I see. And I love seeing the people and the culture existing within those places. So it's not just the tourists that you're seeing. It's people doing their day-to-day things, sitting in cafes and piazzas and going to the open-air markets and buying their fruit and vegetables, and just the vibrancy and the colour, and then the accompanying food and wine that goes with it has definitely been my favourite.
Well, you certainly bring that to life for us. You've been one of our contributors on Travltalk from the beginning, and we're currently building out the network and inviting more contributors to apply. And as our sort of original photo diarist, can you maybe also give some tips and guidance to people that might, want to join us? And I suppose what you found is a nice way to tell a story through photos. What do you tend to sort of think about before you're heading to a place and capturing that for other people to share?
For me, my style is very much sort of shooting from the hip. So I don't go in with a big plan or sort of a shot list that I need to get necessarily. I'll know, if we're going to a bigger tourist attraction, sort of what it sort of looks like. I've had a bit of a look on Instagram and seeing what people have done with it previously. And then I just really like shooting people interacting with these major landmarks. So, in Amsterdam, it was people riding bikes through the city just on their daily commute, or in Bologna, like I said, it was, people in the markets. And I really love capturing just people or tourists even in their natural element, and sort of that can sometimes create a really funny scenario where you've got an interaction between maybe a sculpture and a person and the contrast between those, or it could just be sort of a really moving moment of parents and their kids being by the waterside, or I'm sort of going on a little bit, but I guess that's what I really love about travel photography, is that it can be so surprising and really rewarding sometimes, just being able to sit and watch the world around you a little bit.
I can understand that, because you're a doctor by trade, right? So you obviously have a very sort of complicated day job where I imagine creativity is not always encouraged.
Yeah, no, true. Yeah.
Yeah. And I guess that kind of leads me on to a question I wanted to ask. So you applied, the way that we met is that we sort of put out a call to action on the Aussies in London Facebook page and said, hey, is anyone traveling the world and good with a camera, or already taking, great video footage and blogging, and would like to sort of get paid, I suppose, to share some of that content. We're very much about not paying people to travel, but if you've already got a holiday booked, we like to see ourselves as providing a little bit of extra budget that you can spend once you're there if you're happy to tell the story. I mean, what sort of appealed to you about being a contributor for Travltalk?
I guess prior to being a contributor for the Travltalk network, I was still going on these little trips and taking lots of photos. And mainly it was just for sort of myself or my wife and our family, just seeing what we were doing. And as we kept going on more trips and I kept taking more photos, it sort of, my style sort of became more defined, and I was really enjoying putting these little sort of editorial pieces together, just sort of in my Instagram stories or wherever I could share them. And then when this opportunity came up to make that process a little bit more formalized and really sort of put some pressure on myself to put something together to then be published, it's become a really rewarding process for me, in that I'm able to sit down with all the photos that I've taken and create a bit of a journey, and then add a bit more writing and more writing to that. And it helps me to sort of reminisce about the trip, but also share the memories that we've had with a wider audience. And I've really enjoyed that position.
That's good to hear. I think it's definitely a true traveller loves to kind of share their experiences so that other people can go off the beaten track and, also live the moments that they lived. And it's, I think, really rewarding and great that you're prepared to record so many of yours so that we can follow in your footsteps. So thank you for taking the time to really articulate, I guess, what it is about a place that you like and drop into the cultural sides. I know that you mentioned you were in Rome, and I think you're doing a piece for us on the cultural side there. Where did you eventually land? Because I know we talked about the Sistine Chapel, but did something else take your fancy?
No, I think, the Vatican Museums and the Sistine Chapel really blew my mind. I don't know what I was expecting. I guess, you see the pictures of the Michelangelo roof and you think, oh, that's just going to be what I see. But really the extent of artifacts and beautiful art and culture that they have in those museums just completely blew me away. So I'm really looking forward to, getting a chance to go back through my photos and show that to whoever would like to see.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to kind of seeing your version, I suppose, of the Sistine Chapel, because I've been there many years before, and I guess the memories fade. But, photographs do bring a place to life, and it's almost as though you can feel like you're there, seeing it firsthand. And one of the other things that we'll be looking to do on Travltalk is actually working with someone who, recently visited Notre Dame before it burnt down, and actually remind people what it did look like inside before it disappeared. Because I think, if you unfortunately never got to see it or did see it many years ago, photos are probably one of the few ways that we can sort of remember what it was like inside, for everyone who either did get the chance or didn't, and wish that they knew. I
completely agree with that. It can really help sort of jog that memory of that beautiful time that you have there. And it has been a really unfortunate thing that people won't be able to see the sort of original Notre Dame as it was, because it was and will be stunning.
I suppose that's a reflection of true progression. I made the comment the other day, I went to see Machu Picchu and it's in its original state. It shouldn't surprise too many people to hear that. But, I think it is sad when historic landmarks disappear for whatever reason. But I suppose the great thing about traveling is that you get out there and you can see it at that point in time. And that is special in its own way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that sort of, to bring it more to what we were doing recently, visiting the Colosseum yesterday, it's sort of, you get to appreciate the process of that enormous structure has gone through, from, ancient Roman gladiatorial times through to the medieval changes that it had, and then its interaction with the church, and sort of there's so much fascinating history that goes along with the changes that the building goes through at the time.
Yeah, it's kind of chilling to walk where gladiators once walked and really imagine what actually took place all those years ago. I find it, it sort of really brings a place to life to know that I'm walking on the same ground where, martyrs and, or however we want to refer to these people, that they were very important figures of history. And, that for me has always been what traveling's about. And it sounds like the same thing motivates you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. I'm right there with you.
Well, Thom, thanks so much for joining us today and taking us through your experience of being a Travltalk contributor, and also letting us hear a bit more about your travel style and what you do when you're sort of looking to capture a place. We really appreciate your time.
No, thank you so much for having me, and thank you to the wider Travltalk network for having me on as a contributor. It's been a fantastic journey. Thank you.
And we wish you all the best for your trip back to Australia.
Brilliant. Thank you so much.
Want to get paid to share your travel experiences? Check out the Travltalk.co website or DM us on Instagram for more details.
So we're now joined here by Arianna, who is originally from the UK and was studying at the University of Sussex, and her whole life wanted to go on an exchange in Australia. And Arianna ended up picking Adelaide in South Australia. Arianna, thank you for joining us and welcome to the Travltalking podcast.
It's lovely to be here.
So before we talk about your experiences in Adelaide as an exchange student, let's just find out a little bit about your travelling style. So how many countries have you travelled to so far?
Oh, that's a hard one. I don't know the exact number. I would say around 10, but that is a guess.
Well, that's reasonable. I mean, it's fair to probably say, how old are you, Arianna?
19.
There you go. I mean, 10 countries at 19 isn't a bad way to start. Where was your last trip, given you're currently in Australia? What was your last holiday?
My last holiday was a lovely walking tour of Italy last summer.
Oh, nice. But in Australia, I imagine you've been travelling around. What was the last trip you took there?
The last place I went in Australia was Melbourne.
And we usually say, where's your next trip? But I'm pretty sure you're currently on one. Is that right?
Yeah, that is correct. I'm in Tasmania. I'm currently in Bishino, and it is very quiet.
So you're there with a friend at the moment though, right?
Yeah, I am.
That's good. It's very sparse there, but beautiful. I remember being in Tasmania.
Absolutely gorgeous. Yeah, I've loved the view so far. Even when we're on the coach, like just the scenery it's amazing.
And tell us, when did you actually catch the travel bug? Because you've obviously gone all the way from the UK to Australia. So when did you feel the need to get traveling?
I think when I was about 17, I went interrailing in Europe. And I think from then on, I've just really wanted to see everything because it was just the most amazing experience.
And of the travel experiences you've had to date, what would be one of your most memorable travel stories?
Oh, there's so many. But I would say one of the most memorable ones, just because of how amazing and beautiful it was and how I've never sort of been able to replicate it, is when I went with my family. We went to Morocco, and we spent New Year's Eve in the Sahara Desert. So we camped there, and the way you can see all the stars, because obviously there's no light pollution or anything, it was absolutely insane. You could see the whole Milky Way. It was just, yeah, I've never seen anything like it, and I don't think I ever will.
Well, it's funny you say that, though, because I think one of the most beautiful night skies I've ever seen is actually in Tasmania. So I hope you maybe get to recreate that because, as you said, there's so little light pollution. It's so sort of as far away. And check out tonight maybe and you'll be able to recreate the experience.
I've seen a lot of stars here. It's been, obviously it's like the night you can see everything. But what I really want to see in Tasmania is the obviously the Aurora Australis.
Are they like the Aurora Borealis? But
but for Tasmania.
Oh, really? I didn't even know that existed. It's great to learn things like that on the show. It's supposed to be
green or something, and it's supposed to be very, very pretty, but obviously I haven't actually caught it yet.
Well, good luck. I think
I hope I will.
Yeah, it's a good time to probably ask you a bit more about what it's like to be a Brit over in Australia. Obviously, you're taking the opportunity in holidays and weekends to travel around. But coming back to why you selected Australia for an exchange, I mean, you sort of said you got bitten by the travel bug, and that I believe you told me that you always wanted to do an exchange. Why was that originally?
So originally, I just wanted to see more of the world, and I thought, what I wanted to do was obviously complete my degree in the 3 or 4 years it takes to normally complete a degree. I didn't want to take time out of it, so doing a year abroad was not really an option I wanted to take because I didn't want to extend my degree by that long. So being able to do a semester and have it contribute to my degree, the grades and stuff. So it sort of feels like I'm not wasting time, but I'm also getting to see some amazing things. And that was kind of why I wanted to do it mostly. It was just so I wouldn't have to extend my degree.
And when you decided you wanted to go on an exchange, obviously there's all sorts of universities around the world that you could have applied to. What made you decide on Australia, and what was your criteria for selecting Adelaide University?
Oh, there's a lot of things. With Australia, it's obviously really helpful that there's no language barrier. So obviously, because everyone speaks English. So that's really helpful. I found that, I would have struggled if I'd gone abroad to a country, like, I don't know, in Europe where I wouldn't have known the language. I think I would have really struggled with that as well. It's just everyone, they have the sort of stereotype of Australians just being really, really nice. And I just love that. I think it's, really pleasant. Like everyone's so helpful and nice.
And when you selected Adelaide over, say, I don't know, university in Sydney, I mean, what kind of led you to that particular city? Was there any more detail that you applied, or did you just were you accepted? How did that work?
Essentially, the application process was sort of like you pick, I don't know, 5 or so unis, and then they sort of allocate you on based on, how many spots there are and what grades you got. But I did apply to Adelaide because, I applied to a few Australian universities, but I did. When I was applying for Adelaide, I did really look into it just to make sure I'd actually enjoy it if I went there. Obviously it's a beautiful little town. I really wanted to go somewhere that was kind of smaller because obviously being used to like living near London is, there's always stuff going on. There's so many people around, and I think that it's just, a lot nicer to be in Adelaide, where it's sort of a lot more relaxed and nobody's stressed about getting anywhere or doing anything, and that's just really pleasant. I'd heard about all the festivals that happen in Adelaide, and I thought, that's something I really enjoyed, like, being able to see things that I wouldn't back home and stuff like that. I thought, the Fringe Festival and the RCC, I was very excited about before I came here, and getting to be a part of that was really nice.
That's good to hear. We've talked a few times on this show about the lesser known destinations, and Adelaide has been my hometown. I grew up there. I lived there for 23 years of my life, and I know that it has so many hidden gems. It's got wine regions, as you said. It's got great festivals. We have great gastronomy. And, you know, I also studied in Adelaide at the same university you're at. And I think it is a pretty good student town. Would you agree?
Oh, absolutely. No, it's definitely got a lovely student vibe because, I mean, obviously there's so many international students and there's a lot of like, I don't know, there's a lot of like nightlife as well. And I've met some really nice people here. And, you know, having the beach not that far away from uni is really fantastic as well because you can just go there with friends and like have a little picnic or whatever you feel like doing. And I think that's really pleasant.
So when you talk about friends, who did you end up sort of becoming close with? So you've arrived in Adelaide, you don't really know anyone. Did you find that you hung out a lot with other exchange students, or have you met a few locals as well?
A bit of both. Essentially what happened when I got to the University of Adelaide was they had, you know, the international student, forgotten the word for it, orientation, there you go. And so obviously they gathered all the international students together to tell them about, you know, the culture of Australia and like do's and don'ts and that kind of stuff. So I met, you know, most of my sort of good friends there. And so I would say a lot of them are from the US. But I also met like one of my sort of best friends is he's from Mount Gambier, actually. He just studies at the uni. So he was sort of new into Adelaide, but he is Australian, you know, born and raised, and he's such a nice guy. So I have met sort of both.
Yeah, it's good to kind of, I think, have a local perspective, but also have, I guess, like-minded people that have come on their own exchanges to hang around, if I recall, because I also did an exchange, but I went to America and I didn't end up living on campus. And I think that's something that we talked about when we connected off this podcast. But you were saying when you first arrive in Adelaide, you had a choice. Do you sort of go with the campus housing or get your own place? What did you go for in the end?
So I got a place in a student house instead of going on the, well, they don't have any specific like on campus housing, but instead they have a apartment block sort of across the road from the university, and that's where most of the students, like especially the international students, are living. So that's the urbanist. But I didn't choose to live there just because it was a little bit expensive, and I sort of thought I'd prefer to spend money on traveling and seeing things than you know, where I was staying.
Great. And I mean, with that in mind, what do you think are the main differences between studying in Adelaide and studying in Sussex?
So obviously at Sussex, I was focused a lot more on my actual studies because I had sort of more time to use to do studying and hang out at the library and that kind of stuff. So I sort of focused a little bit less on my studies here, which is probably not the greatest thing. I've tried to fit it in, but it's hard to sort of balance the sort of like trying to be social, trying to go and see things and get on with your studies. It's really hard to sort of balance them all here. Whereas, you know, obviously back home, I didn't have that problem. You know, it was really easy because I just had all the time in the world to just get on with things because I wasn't trying to travel while I was studying.
And are you working as well? Because Australia is quite expensive and it's quite common for people to have a part-time job. What have you decided to do there?
Unfortunately, I've sort of had to end up finding a job because obviously funds run low very quickly, especially when you're in a foreign country, because you just want to buy all the souvenirs you possibly can just to remember it, and then you end up realizing that you spent all the money in your account by accident. But yeah, so what I've ended up doing is getting sort of a part-timer at a lovely pizzeria in Adelaide.
Oh, nice. Was it easy to find a job or did it take you a while?
Fortunately, I knew, obviously, because I met people from my from my courses, but what the modules I'm studying at Adelaide do a lot of group work. So I've sort of been put into groups with various people, and I was able to ask one of them who had a job if they would be able to give their boss my number, and they managed to. But I think it's very difficult otherwise if you're handing out CVs and that kind of thing and emailing companies, they really don't get back to you. So it's quite tough unless you sort of know someone.
Word of mouth. And how many hours do you end up working a week?
So it's very sort of casual. So I would like to work, but obviously I can only work up to 20 with my visa. So I'd hope to be working 20.
Well, thanks, Arianna, for joining us. I believe you're sort of summarising this, and we're going to publish an article you're writing on student life in Adelaide on Travltalk.co. And also you're going to let us know what Tasmania was like in another article. Is that right?
Yeah, that's the plan.
How many more days are you there for?
So I'm here until next Wednesday. So that's about a week. But we've obviously been here a couple of days already.
I look forward to hearing what you uncover there in your article. But thanks again for joining us and sharing your experience on exchange life in Adelaide.
Absolutely no problem. Thanks for having me.
You've been listening to the Travltalking podcast, and a special thanks to our guests, Arianna and Thom, for joining us today. Don't forget to download Travltalk, the app that connects you with like-minded travellers nearby, wherever you are in the world. Thanks for listening, and catch you next week.
Go your own way.